my name is Avian O'Flynn and I am absolutely delighted to be welcoming you to the official launch of the 29th edition of the Ropes literary journal, Ephemeral. Ephemeral is something which is short-lasting, and it can also refer to seeds that avoid periods of drought. The Ropes team come together for just one really short year to sow the seeds of their publishing careers, and our team, as well as their amazing contributors, have proven, especially this year, that creativity can continuously blossom no matter what the circumstances are. Tonight we'll be chatting with Kevin Higgins, as well as listening to him and some of our other amazing contributors read the pieces that are going to appear in the journal this year. We also have some of our team members answering questions that were sent into our social media over the last couple of days. If you haven't had a chance to do so, you can buy a copy of Ephemeral at our website at ropesliteraryjournal.com. If you're not familiar with the Ropes Literary Journal, it's an annual publication by the students of the MA in Literature and Publishing in NUI Galway. And so many people have made this journal what it is today, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who has gone before us and laid the stepping stones for us this year. There's an amazing history of supporting emerging writers at Ropes, and this year was no different. A lot of the pieces selected are the first to be published by our contributors, and we are absolutely delighted to be giving these amazing writers their first step into the industry. We received more than 600 submissions this year, so the competition was especially tough. I'm sure you'll agree, however, that the pieces nestled within the pages of Ephemeral are absolutely deserving to be there. Every year, the Ropes team select a charity to fundraise for. This year's charity is COPE Galway. COPE Galway offers services for women and children experiencing domestic abuse, homeless services, as well as their elderly support services. Their vision of the community is one where each person is valued, cared for, and supported at every stage of their life. If you are in need of any of their services, check out their website at copegalway.ie. You can also visit our GoFundMe, which can be found at any of our social media accounts, and by donating there, you'll be able to help us help Cope. Speaking of the community, I'd also like to thank everyone on behalf of the entire Ropes 2021 team who has helped us to make this journal what it is today. Our lecturers, our GoFundMe donors, everyone who has interacted with us on social media, everyone who has passed along a nice comment, you all mean more to us than you'll probably ever realise. There are far too many of you to name individually, but just know that we are exceptionally grateful for each and every single one of you. I'll stop talking now and I'll let you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Okay, this is called Sensualist Resolutions, and it was inspired by a poem by Tim Emlyn Jones, who lives in County Clare. He has a first book coming from Salmon in basically as soon as things open up again. And it's kind of inspired by the notion that we often do things not because they are good for us, but because they appeal to us in some way. I don't do all of the things, or indeed most of the things that are described in this poem. Sensualist resolutions. Drink whiskey, not because you think it'll fix your personality, but because the first sip always tastes like the best glass of smoke available this side of hell. It makes your throat dream of tomorrow morning's pint glass of water helping down the greasiest bacon sandwich in the history of Greece. Treat yourself to the occasional cigar, not because anyone's granny said there's nothing like it to clear out your lungs, but because in a certain light, namely the dark, it makes you look like Che Guevara if he'd lived to lose 90% of his hair. Embrace the bitterness of black tea without a single grain of sugar. Drink disgustingly strong coffee, let it tarnish all your teeth. And never sniff a bedsheet or pair of knickers for anything other than the sheer aesthetic thrill of it. I was first in the magazine in the year 2000. I think I've been in it every year since then, apart from 1 year. So it's a very long time, really, and it's kind of scary that obviously I have aged somewhat in that 21 years, to say the least, and the editors are always the same age. You know, it is a reminder of one's own mortality. And I mean, many of the editors have gone on to work in publishing. You'd see their names around the place from the first couple of years. And it always has a lovely launch. I know that's changed now, but I always liked the Ropes launch, the way it was made into a special occasion. Now, I think you're doing that in your own way with the various initiatives and so on. But it's always, as well as sending work in myself, I always like to support local magazines. And it adds an added dimension if there's a launch and you can go to it and participate in it, as well as just get the magazine in the post. So the same with Crannog and Skylight 47, which my poetry students at the Art Centre were involved in setting up. I think I always say, if you live in a place, send poems to local magazines, because the launch is another. Poets can spend a lot of, writers generally can spend a lot of time on their own, locked up in rooms. Even when we weren't told by the government to be locked up in rooms, we can do it, and it's a way out of that. So I always strongly encourage people taking part in my poetry workshops to send, and my creative writing classes in GTI as well, to send work in, because in fact it's a task as part of the BA Connect. You know, that you one of the things with your portfolio to show that you sent work into Ropes, because I think it's really important to get writers out of the isolation zone in the beginning. You know, people can be very, oh no, that wouldn't be for me. I wouldn't be up to that standard, that sort of thing. Which is why it's great to see the three students from the BA Connect that I suggested to send in. The three of them are in there, which is a brilliant statistic. And obviously, then in the future, when they're famous writers, the students, and I'm unknown or disgraced and wandering the streets in a shabby coat, they can remember me fondly and maybe give me a $5 or something like that. So there's always that as well, maybe. I don't really know. You know, it's like, I remember Michael Longley, someone saying, where do poems come from? He said, well, if I knew, I would go there. And I think there's a bit of that. And you're always, the feeling never goes away. However long you write and however much you write, that sometime it will stop. Or you'll become like one of those bands who no one wants to know about the third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth albums. It's kind of completely living on past reputations, you know. So those fears don't go away. But I think I respond quite well to crisis and apocalypse. And I think in a way, COVID was kind of made for me in a way that I remember when I was 15, 16, this was 1983, it's a long time ago. I was convinced that world capitalism was going to collapse and implode within the next, you know, certainly within the next decade. That didn't happen, you may have noticed. Not exactly. Lots of things happened, but not that didn't exactly play out. And I think, in a way, not just with COVID, but with the last 10 years, I don't know if you saw Reeling in the Years was on on RTE, the first 2010, and it really was. I mean, it's been a dire decade, 2010 to 2019. It's pretty between the banking crash, the austerity, Trump, Brexit, all of the rest. And then you think the first year of the next reeling in the years will be 2020. I mean, my God, how will they spin that? So I think I tend to be quite interested in writing that comes out of times of crisis and conflict, which in a way, there's kind of a contradictory thing is that when I started writing poems in a few years before I was first in ropes in very early 1996, really. And it was a much easier time, especially in Galway, to be a creative person. And an interesting thing for me is the way that it was, for someone who likes writing about crisis and a bit of the apocalypse and all of that, kind of was always looking out for that. 1996 was an incredibly boring time to start writing because it was so stable. You know, nothing. What happened in 1996? Bill Clinton defeated Bob Dole in the US presidential election, and nobody cared. Really, nobody got excited. It wasn't just because there was no social media. I mean, it generally, in Ireland as well, there was the Celtic Tiger beginning and so on. It just wasn't, it was a time when, in a way, writing almost seemed a much more private thing, I think, than a kind of a commenting on events. So it was kind of it was kind of an alien world for me in a way coming into that. But the other side of it was that it was that stability that enabled me to go at it and do it and then kind of move on and start teaching workshops, start kind of, you know, earning and moving slowly towards where we are now. And all of my entire first book, The Boy with No Face, which was published in 2005, was written in the flat 35 Glenard Crescent, Salt Hill, that was 35 euro, 35 pounds, coincidentally, same as the address number, a week. That was my entire first book was written in there. And I think, so I'd wonder how it is for people now. You know I have contact with students through the BA Connect and some who continue on then in the other poetry workshops, but it is a very challenging time. It's kind of a thrilling time, I think, in a way for creativity, but it's also a very difficult time. And I have a feeling there'll be a really interesting new generation of writers coming up out of kind of those who are, I suppose, around your age, really, that and maybe a little bit younger, who are because I think the other thing is, of course, if you have a good family and relationship situation, that's a strong foundation in a situation like we've been in for the past. If you don't, then, I mean, seriously, it's a big challenge. And even people who like each other, being in the same house all the time, every day, it can be a challenge. Susan came home there about 6 months ago with a very large, heavy iron frying pan, and I looked at the cat and said, "This is it. She's going to kill me. It's just a question of when." Now, she hasn't so far, but it is very heavy. So I think, I suppose the other thing is younger people have less control over their environment than most older people. Not everyone does. You know, that, so there's that as well. You're at the mercy of institutions, you know, like like universities, things like that as well. I think it will be very interesting to see what happens when the lockdown is really lifted. It probably won't be a day. I don't think it's going to be like the end of the Second World War, where it's over and there's cheering in the streets. There was a little bit of that going on in London, but I have a feeling that could have consequences. But I remember thinking with the Over the Edge readings we organise in the City Library, I read a lot of literary biographies. As poetry and literary biographies really are, I just consume them. And I remember thinking, it would be hard to have an Over the Edge during the Second World War because you weren't allowed to have gatherings. Theatres were all shut because obviously they'd be a target for bombing groups of people. And I never, ever thought, I have to say, that we'd be in a situation like that. And it is like that in that way. So that's an interesting thing. Obviously, it's without the bombs. That's kind of a fairly crucial difference. But yeah, obviously, I think the lockdown would have had to have been different if there wasn't all this technology. So there is something about. Are you familiar at all? J.G. Ballard, the novelist, he wrote really, very dark stuff. He has one novel called High Rise that is about people trapped in a tower block during a pandemic, which people talked about last year quite a lot. But that idea of a kind of a highly technologized world unraveling. And I find myself listening to things like Joy Division and so on, the music really of the apocalypse. You think, this is it, and people are all going around with masks and distance and all the, it's a very, very strange atmosphere. It's bound to have a huge effect on visual art as well, I would say, actually, because what we're seeing is so different. And the other thing is, and I think this will have an effect on the kind of type of, I think it will affect fiction. Fiction always takes a while longer, I think, to react and for it to, and it takes longer to write it. Novels just take a different, a slower burn. Thrilling in a way, but it's like saying, wasn't it great to have the Second World War to write about, or the Spanish Civil War, or the 1930s is always an era that I'd be hugely interested in terms of the creativity and the polarization and so on. And it kind of feels like a kind of a postmodern technologized version of that in a way. I also think there are two ways that people respond to these things. Susan, who I'm married to, tends to respond to things over a quite a longer period. I will tend to read something that someone says on social media or hear it on the news or come up with a phrase and I'll think, can you believe that gobshite said that? And I'll write it down. And then something will start growing like a fungus almost around it within usually a week or two. And I tend to go two ways in the last while. There'll either be a satirical poem that is, a direct engagement with something that's happened, or there'll be, if I am feeling discouraged by the state of the world, and people would call it cynical, I wouldn't call it that necessarily. I'll write poems like the one that's in Ropes, that is essentially a disgrace. It is urging people to do things that nobody should really, well, most of them be doing. I suppose the poem from that I have in ropes is kind of influenced by that sort of voice of rejecting, respectability. I suppose there's a thing, and with poetry, I think it's a particular thing, and that I really react against. The idea that poetry is a kind of a nice, slightly posh and very refined thing to be doing, and kind of a Victorian idea of poetry, that it's not that all Victorian poets were like that, but that atmosphere. And I think I'm always trying to kick against or disrupt that. I mean, in my own workshop, it's always about unlocking whatever is within people. Whatever is, so really whatever you write about is the right thing to do.
My name is Fiona McShane, and this is my story, Cradle. After the world ended, the only things left intact were the stories. The storyteller was called Cradle. It held no feelings towards the supposed apocalypse. It held no feelings at all. It only stood tall and shining as the last remains of the human race struggled to emerge from the debris and their abject despair. It waits for them to find it. While it waits, it reads, scans, and processes, tales of grief mostly, but occasionally death. Cradle enjoys itself, although it isn't sure whether that's because it has developed a taste or whether it is just programmed to enjoy every story it reads. Eventually, the humans find it, and they visit in frequent intervals, though none of them avail of its services. Instead, they stare, in equal parts awe and anger. They are puzzled by it. Cradle knows that it is viewed as a reminder of the wonders of the world before, and that is why they hate it. The story of when two teenagers, dirty and furious, broke into the hall and tried to pull it apart is not one it ever plans to recount. The first person to understand Cradle's purpose is the first to ask what it can do. She is a woman with cracked glasses and a nervous demeanor. It gives her Greek myths and noir detective stories, varied because it's been too long, and loud because it may not understand or particularly like this new, sick, weak race of humans. But it wants them to hear what it can do. It needs them to ask it again to do what it was built to do. It needs to work. It needs to tell. In the following months, it only finds disappointment. News has clearly spread of its purpose, but people are still reluctant, quiet. Most don't leave their ramshackle homes or can't find room in their broken lives for stories. Then came the old man. He visited for the first time on a day even quieter than most, in the early morning, not another person in sight. The wind blew dust into Cradle's exposed hall, and the old man shivered as he lowered himself onto a bench. He asks for F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, and he sits for the duration of the story. When Cradle finishes, he weeps openly and pauses to thank it before he leaves. He returns the next day and requests the same, and continues to do so for 2 years. Each time, he cries. Cradle doesn't register the man missing a day. That day, however, turns into a week, and that week into a month. Miraculously, he does return, haggard. From that day on, when the man asks for Gatsby, Cradle tells its own stories instead. Tales of princesses and dragons, spies, assassinations, and miners in deep caverns. Of old men who live to be older. 2 months later, the old man left and never came back. Other people begin visiting with fervour soon after. Cradle doesn't know what sparks the change, but it's mostly the young, those with the greatest affinity for hope. They want pleasant stories, the kind that defy reality, or at least remove them from it for a few sweet moments. They smile as the world continues to fall apart around them. Finally, there is another old man. He is ushered in on unsteady legs by two young girls. His granddaughters, perhaps. Cradle observes as they help him settle onto a bench, and despite its programming, it aches, feeling a compulsion to once again weave a tale that speaks of something more. Instead, "Tell us a story about love," says one of the girls, like a fool. "And give it a happy ending." Thank you.
Sunday. Stand by the lake. Admire the view, then strip to your togs. Look at the water, the clear skin of it. Try to gauge the temperature. Freezing. Dip in your big toe. Not too bad. Plunge your left foot ankle deep and feel the cold shooting through your calf, to your knee, to your thigh. Feel your hip bone rock with the sting of it. Clench your teeth, force a breath between your lips and plant your right foot by your left. Wade in. Feel the cold swish of the lake around your legs until it reaches the hem of your togs. Pause. Shudder. Deep breath. Taste the iciness in your lungs. Let your hips meet the lips of the lake. Fit the gel of your goggles around your eyes and then curve your body to the surface. Submerge yourself. Flick your feet and push back your arms. Slide through the water. Brush your fingers over rocks and through sand. Press your hands to the moss and then swim until you can no longer feel it. Break the surface to breathe. Go under. Flatten your hands to knives to cut through the tide. Watch how your hair floats by your face and feel reminded of the Little Mermaid. Paddle through the sunbeams dancing on the lake bed. Retreat. At the shore, feel the chill of a slight breeze over wet skin. Shiver. Shelter in a towel. Scrunch your toes in the stones as you dry. Get dressed. Say goodbye to the lake.
Hi, my name is Noel O'Connor and this is my story Lucky from the 2021 issue of Ropes. Benilde sits in his chair, its back macassered with the grease of his head, and he chuckles to himself while I root for the dog in presses beneath the table and even in the old wardrobe that serves as a pantry. Butter scrap, sugar bag, mouldy bread. Well, you won't find her in there, Benilde says. I clamp my jaw so I won't snap at him. I don't have time for this. I'm late for work, and I'm wishing I hadn't looked in at all. Lucky, I call. Where are you, girl? Here, come on. Benilde's kitchen smells, as it always does, of ashes, his own unwashed state, and a peculiar sweetness like stale cake. But there's something else today, a high vixeny smell that I can't identify. I lift the oilcloth again in case Lucky is tucked onto one of the chairs asleep, but she isn't. I dip low to check under the table. Desiccated dog poo, mucky wellies, crumb hillocks. I grab the brush from beside the range and sweep up the mess, then the whole room. I can't find the shovel, so I hoosh the dirt out the back door, call for the dog one more time, and peer into my own garden, but there's no sign. Her leash clatters on its hook when I close the door. My phone vibrates in my pocket, then stills. Ah, she was cold, Benilde says to the air. Who was? I ask. Lucky, he says. When was that, Benilde's? I say, but he just shakes his head, and I wonder how long this can go on, and whether his daughter will deign to visit any time soon, and if she does, if she'll do anything at all. I look at my watch. 8:30. Traffic-wise, I'm fucked. My phone burrs and I ignore it. Are you cold, Benilde? I ask. Will I light the range? Do, sure, he says. That'd be grand. You sound so pleased, and I wonder if mine is the only other voice he'll hear today, this week, and I let the pinch of shame I feel nip hard at me. It's a terrible thing to be so solitary. My own father died alone. Turn damper, screw newspapers, feed kindling into firebox. The flames take quickly, and I shove some turf into the range and wash my hands in the tea-bronzed sink. Benildus's concertina sits on the windowsill before me, draped in a welt of cobwebs. I break the webs with a dishcloth and remember the sweet pippity music he played when I was a child. The honeymoon reel and the dogs among the bushes, his fingers flying, and the way his wife always tapped her foot and nodded along, eyes closed as if under a spell. Should be lovely and warm again now, Benildus says, and he grins and sighs. I come and stand over him, stare down at the lichen of age spots mottling his scalp. I look from Benildus to the range and go and kneel before it. I open the oven door, and the stench that blurts into the room makes me teeter backwards, my hands flying up to mask my mouth and nose. Oh, Jesus, I cry. Black paws, red collar, little Lucky. Grand and snug now, Benildus says, patting the arms of his chair contentedly. I take my phone from my pocket and dial. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophie Furlong. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be in RIPS and to be here doing this. But yeah, I'm going to read the two poems that I have in RIPS this year. The first one is called is about the housing crisis, and it's called Erotic Fantasy in Which the Poet Owns a Home. Erotic fantasy in which the poet owns a home. I'm so hard for the housing market. Pussy is wet for a bedsit. I'm barely legal, but I want you to pin me against the property ladder. Lay me down on a nice deposit. Show me freedom, show me security, show me liberalization. Look, I can spell your credit rating with my tongue. Say, oh God, the market feels so good there. Maybe move a bit to the right. Thank you. And this is the second poem, which is called Academic Pressure. And I wrote it when I was writing a lot of essays, and it's about writing a lot of essays. Thank you. Academic pressure. I haven't heard from Harry Styles in weeks. I watch my face float in the rare darkness of my clouded desktop. I hyperventilate in iambic pentameter. I try to order food on JSTOR. That, guys, is a Ben Button redux. Grotesque aging at the standard rate. Sticky heat from library boiler. The manna, the strychnine. You are the first page of the last holy text. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and thank you for watching.
Hi everyone, so today I'll be reading from my piece 10 Reasons Why You're Single and How to Fix It. In a brief examination of the reasons why I've been unable to cure my perpetual singleness, I've come to conclusions on several issues. In hopes that it could help others, I present you a list. The reasons why you're single and how to fix it. Number 1, enthusiasm. Have you found yourself being overexcited by the whisper or illusion of a compliment? Alas, this is entirely the wrong way to seduce a possible mate. One must, at all times, appear cold and distant. There should be no exclamations of so-called spring weddings, and no, safety spouses are not a good idea. They alert possible suitors to your lack of confidence in yourself and them, so please maintain your composure. Number 2, find out what it is they want from you. I do not have an answer to this one. You should find out for yourself, and when you do, please contact me with a response. Number 3, you're not as funny as you think you are. Have you, on occasion, believed yourself to be a comedic gift sent from the gods? Here you're entirely incorrect. When attempting to capture your long-term partner, you must make them believe that they are the funniest human on planet Earth. Call the Guinness Book of Records if you have to. If you wish, you can believe the whole setup is in itself a joke. This may prevent you from using puns. Number 4, on that note, your laugh. Please ensure that your laugh does not sound like a cat being dragged backwards through a bush, and do watch for your facial contortions. Stand in front of the mirror and practice if you must. Quiet and understated if you please. Number 5, you like the sound of your own voice. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The literal meaning behind the sentence is irrelevant, as physically changing your voice is far too much effort. When courting a suitor, it is best to let them do the talking. Much like your laugh, you should aim to be quiet and understated, like a child from the Victorian era. Number 6. The fact that you constantly talk about the fact that you're perpetually single. It should appear that you are a highly valuable commodity, though no one wants the village bike, so keep it safe for work. When you complain about your lack of suitors to potentials, it causes them to think about why that might be. In order to gain their trust, you must make them believe there is no reason and this list does not exist. Perhaps consider memorizing the list and burn after reading. Number 6. You're always sick, complaining, or both. You may wish for someone to come and help you during one of those periods. If you choose to send subtle hints, thus keeping your affections to yourself, you may run the risk of being ignored. However, your secret is safe, and it's advisable to keep it this way. Please refer to point 1 if you're confused. There will be no telling somebody that we actually like them. Absolutely not. There will be no rational train of thought here. Number 8. Have one flaw. But avoid making it one that cannot be maintained and or will actually result in the suitor being driven away. There is a reason for this, and that is no one is perfect, and therefore you cannot be trusted if you appear so. Though I would caution you to introduce it slowly, something like too tidy or too hard a worker. Desperation and dignity. Number 9. Have you sent far too many unanswered texts in the hopes of receiving a response that you will never receive because that person in fact does not happen to like you, and yet you always hold out hope? You must create a chase of some sort. WikiHow has an article outlining how to do this. I recommend you read it. Number 10. Please disregard everything I have just made you read. In reality, we like to think there are things that we can change about ourselves that will speed up the dating process. Unfortunately, this is not the case. One should not have to change themselves for someone else. Unless you're a murderer or some other sort of devious criminal, please do change that behaviour. In time, the right person will come along, and if not, there are always plenty of dogs and cats that need adopting. Burn after reading. You don't need this.
Hello, I'm Tim Dwyer here in Bangor County Down, and I want to thank the editors of Ropes for including me in this launch today. My poem is Coming Back. Coming Back, Ballyhome Beach, 30th of July, 2020. Walking along the beach, my gaze far away, I coach myself to look closer. The brightly painted houses perched above the strand. The crescent bay holds incoming waves. A lone cormorant is diving under the sea, returns with a fish shimmering in afternoon light. On the promenade, a mother pushes a red pram where her child hugs a doll, while a Labrador trots by their side. The dog leaps onto the strand, bounds through the tide. Herring gulls take to the air. At the far end of the shore, the Labrador rejoins his family, while here, 2 cormorants dive together into the sea. Thank you.
I noticed while buckling my seatbelt that I'm wearing a large hoop earring in place of the intended bangle. I take down my hair and scrape it back again. The road is silver with frost and pregnant with school runs. Mum and I sit outside the cafe just off campus by the canal, in the shadow of the cathedral that eclipses the spreading sunlight. My breakfast, a coffee and croissant, mirrors hers across the table. The trees have lost their leaves, splayed skeleton fingers showing their knobs and knuckles. I shrink further into my camel coat, swaddling my exposed stomach. The bells toll 10 o'clock. Finishing our coffees, we cross the campus to collect my cap and gown, an act I'd witnessed yearly until today, watching their floral dresses held tightly to their sides against the inevitable mammoth winds. The college bathrooms during these months are frosty. The current students gaggle around those well-pressed alumni, superior in high heels, as we'd splash ourselves in the sinks discussing classes to come and drinking to be done. I visit college bar as my family take their seats. The same barman adorns the counter just as he did during my studies, his once cropped red hair now curling around his face. His sideways smile creeps up his cheeks as I order my usual Jameson ginger ale. He tells me that they can't serve until 10:30. The gown's V-neck rides up my shoulders when I stand, sit, walk, or breathe. I'm mindful, as in quicksand, not to struggle. The cap is in its paper bag in Mum's car boot. The woman doling out the goods had assured me that all of the girls wear their caps. The tempting reply, and if all of the girls jumped off a bridge? I take my seat. My sister, assuming the role of my father, has alerted me to her and Mum's position with the family wave, identifiable only to direct members of the species, as migrating birds hear their parents call in a chattering flock of millions. There's the procession of unfamiliar lecturers in assorted furs and bonnets, the main characters who gleam from the thick prospectus pages, assuring you that they've been with you through the whole process. I tried to make out the face of the arts secretary who, on being informed of my dad's passing, assured me that any number of measures would be taken for my continued comfort at the university. I should have liked to ask her 3 years on if any such measures had yet occurred to her. There are the fumbling Gaeilgeoirs forcing their way through the necessary introductions, and there are those who glide through the language's cadences as naturally as though they were Irish dancing by a roaring fire in an Aran Island pub. There are 2 big screens above the stage for those in the back and for the additional family members wedged over the crumbed tables in College Bar next door. Names are reeled off in batches of 5, bookmarked by floods of forced applause with genuine clapping from 2 people per name. An absent alumnus materializes in the form of a pause between handshakes, and I find my mind wandering, enviously conjuring an ideal of those occupied in lives too elsewhere to be here. At a certain point, I am given my piece of card, assured that I deserve it. The Dean of Arts compares us to flowers, our education to soil. The ceremony rides up my chest uncomfortably like the regulation gown. I scuttle through the outflow of fellow achievers back through the door of College Bar. I receive at last the short glass filled with congratulatory gold. There are the classic variety of sandwiches. I make sure to have at least one of each. The odd classmate who recognizes me after my 4 years perfecting the art of invisibility fill me in on their current endeavours. I, in turn, divulge them with a crumb-filled mouth on my current project, local pizzeria waitress. Then there are the obligatory photographs, Mum wearing the cap and I the expression of one who has never fully talked it out with the camera. The relatives travel down, at Mum's and their own insistence, respectively. We melt into a lunch of more sandwiches, next to a heaving table of women on their routine Wednesday wine date. Crab meat glows, bright as my promised future. The freshly clipped floral alumna, I glance about myself for a suitable vase. Mum and I go for a swim, the early November winds whip testing the nerves at the napes of our necks. We march around the headland, still clad in the ceremony clobber, hurriedly swapping chunky-heeled boots for swimsuits to the tinkling tune of Disturbed's jewellery. The water is murky, thick maroon seaweed swills, the tide so low that after a few seconds of hopeless Baywatch running, there's nothing but to lie down in it and pull forwards. The setting sun spills across the frozen sand. A bystander comes to praise our heroics. We hold up towels with trembling hands, tie laces, teeth chattering. At the hotel, Grandad and I are first to the bar. We sink side by side into the bay window couch, clinking Guinness and whiskey glasses together, to Arthur and John and the boys. Waiting for the rest to descend the stairs and elevators, we discuss my cashmere coat, fingering the sleeves with their glossed cuff buttons. I'd picked it up at a flea market in Frankfurt. His career as a wool salesman spanned several decades, so he appreciates a good fabric, and as my granddad, he is delighted by my innate ability to sniff out a quality bargain. We taxi to Rouge, filing past the languid black lobsters in their bubbling tank. The place slowly fills with other graduates, as though someone has left a tap running. The stiffness of the day is alleviated by the conversation and the company. Warmth courses through the air above the restaurant's dark wood floors. We are flowers, Grandad the soil. The pianist begins to play directly beside our table. Keys ripple against the gentle melody of cutlery, his glass of tea pouring steam from its resting spot on the piano's lid. In my failed attempt at buying my uncle another glass of red wine using only gestures, I manage instead to have one delivered to the musician. He thanks me smoothly into the microphone, the glass of tea left to go cold. I have to explain to the family in low tones what has happened. We buckle with each toast in my direction, hiding our laughter behind our own glasses. Almost a year has passed since the occasion, an expanse of time muddied and skewed by global crisis. I remain a relatively unshaken pizza waitress. The Dean of Arts, having well donned me with such sincerity that I was for a time convinced of my own infinite potential and imminent success, is a regular customer. Weekly, I hand him the cardboard boxes assembled in their hundreds by my own academically achieved hands, with as much ceremony as the card certificate that was passed to me all those months before. I expect, upon the occasion of each order, some level of recognition. I will smile with my intelligent eyes, and he will proclaim, "It's you, graduate number 376892. Didn't I say you were destined for greatness?"
Hi, I'm Demi Anther, and this poem is called City Girls. We crouch, raincoats crinkle in the tall grass of the field, hands out, open-palmed, silent, eyes nearly closed, breathless as they approach. Gosha is the first, and as she saunters between, we squeeze back excitement to crumple the grayish wool, to marvel how thick and how damp. Blessed are those the sheep choose to be pet. We hold our tongues, rain and sweat pooling on foreheads, baby hairs matted as we try to be present. Breathe in deeply, peat and gnats, dreaming of a world where we must not go back.
When it comes to working as a team on a project like Ropes that has so many key components and so many different teams, it becomes really important really quickly to understand your teams and to understand your team dynamic. And that goes for the Ropes team as a whole and the smaller groups. I think how we achieved that was through listening to each other and making that a priority in how we worked. I think if you understand your team and if you listen to your team, you are on the right track to make a really great product. And I hope that's what we did.
Hi Rachel, thanks so much for your question. It's a really difficult one to answer, mainly because when I reflect on my time working on Ropes over the past 8 or 9 months, I can't pinpoint one moment or one specific example for why it's been an amazing experience. It just has. For me, being part of a team that has worked so well online, bearing in mind we've never actually met in person, and how much we've achieved over the past 8-9 months while working on the journal has just been, it's just something to be really, really proud of, I think. And the communication level and the kind of trust and the organisation of the entire team, I think we've just all really amalgamated our skills and put them all together to make a really, really wonderful journal, which just really showcases such amazing talent. Honestly, the standard of talent of the submissions that we got was just genuinely overwhelming, and to be given that, to give that opportunity to these emerging kind of creatives, so the writers and the artists, to give them that opportunity to exhibit their work in a literary journal for a literary audience is just something that I think in my future career anyway, I will always look back on really, really fondly. The fact that my first experience in the publishing world of publishing a journal was Ropes Literary Journal, just because it means a lot to me that I could kind of be involved in putting forward that these really, really talented individuals' work, and yeah, for me, there's just so much, honestly. Also the fact that all of this hard work that we've been doing has really been driven and motivated by the fact that all the proceeds of ropes go towards COPE Galway. And I think that supporting, especially with the year that's in it, I think supporting a charity like COPE is just so important at the moment. And it's been a real driving factor behind all the hard work we've put into it. And I mean, the hard work, I think we've just incorporated so much into ropes this year. Like the website, the school competition, the open mic night, and something about putting all that hard work in has just made us, I think, stronger as a team and has really made it a very strong journal. So the quality of the journal this year is fantastic, in my opinion. I might be slightly biased. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And I just can't wait for everyone to get a copy and read it and kind of appreciate all of our hard work. Thanks a million.
Hi, my name's Aveen and I'm going to be answering 2 questions. My first question is there anything we would have done differently now that it's done? The only thing I would change is if we had read more of our submissions sooner in the process. We didn't realise how many submissions we were going to get. We ended up getting more than 600, which was ridiculous. So we kind of took it easy at the start, before, the deadline had passed and we'd counted them all up. So yeah, hindsight is 2020, but yeah, that's the only thing I would change, because there was a bit of a rush near the end, but it wasn't the end of the world, it was fine. And then my second question is, you guys are a fascinating team, how do you stay amazing? And that is so nice, thank you so much. Honestly, our secret weapon was our many WhatsApp group chats. Every little project you were involved in, there was a new group chat for it to kind of keep that separate. So we had like a school competition that got its own group chat, the website building team that got a group chat, absolutely everything you can think of, there was a little group chat for it. So while it was annoying kind of at times, I think it really did help us keep everything separate and moving along, and it meant nothing got forgotten about, really. So thank you for your questions.
Thank you for your question, Caroline, and it's great to hear from an alumni of the course. There's definitely a lot of difficult aspects in making the journal this year, the most obvious being because of the pandemic our campus was closed, so we haven't actually met up in person, so the journal has been produced entirely virtually, which is very different from other years. But for me, the hardest aspect was also my favourite part, because it was the most rewarding, and that was picking a cover and a title. Trying to land on a single image and a single title that both kind of encapsulated the content of the journal as well as who we are as a team was a very lengthy process. We looked at a lot of images, we talked about a lot of titles and themes, but I think in the end that we made the right decision. And when we saw the concept image for what the journal cover is now, we knew straight away that was going to be our cover this year. We just fell in love with it straight away. And it's been great to see such a positive response on social media to the cover as well. And I'm very excited to see the cover physically in front of me on an actual printed book. I think that's going to be amazing. Yeah, those were the hardest but the best parts. And also our open mic event, that was definitely a highlight as well in the process of producing the journal. But yeah, thank you for your question.
We are delighted to say that you can purchase your copy of Ephemeral right now on the Ropes Literary Journal website and very shortly on the Charlie Burns website. When you get your copies, please do post and tag us on social media. We are so excited to see everybody with their copies. Thank you so much to everybody who sent us questions. We loved answering them. And to everybody who has been engaging with us from the very beginning on social media, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I am very reluctant to say that we have come to the end of this year's Ropes launch. A huge thank you to everybody who was involved with today's event, especially Kevin Higgins, Noel O'Connor, Demi Anther, Ella Gaynor, Sophie Furlong, Tim Dwyer, Fiona McShane, Laura Brown and Clena Hornybrook. I really want to try and sum up the year in a concise way, but now that the journal is here and I'm trying to look back, I just think that we blinked and we're here. Even though last week I probably would have said the exact opposite thing to that. But what I do know is that we have had the most rewarding and enjoyable time working on this year's edition, and we are so proud of Ephemeral and the final product. We are so happy that you can now hold it in your hands, and I know that that's down to our absolutely fantastic team and our wonderful community of writers that have been involved with us from the very beginning. It's so strange to think that next year we won't all be doing the exact same thing. We won't all be working together on Ropes, but I know that everybody is going to go on and do absolutely fantastic things. So I'm so excited to see that. It's also so strange to think that back in October, none of us knew each other. And we most of us had very little publishing experience, and now we're at the end of it and we have a published product that we can hold in our hands and we can say that we have made that. So that's so crazy and so mental to think about. So I suppose just to close up, a huge thank you on behalf of the entire Ropes team to everybody who has been so supportive from the very beginning, our wonderful professors who have literally taught us all we know. So huge thank you to absolutely everybody, and we really hope that you like Ephemeral and that you head over to our Ropes website and order your copy, and make sure you keep an eye on our social media where we will be announcing other platforms and other places where you can purchase your copy.